Hello, and welcome to episode 74 of the Medical Device Success podcast and videocast, and also a hearty Happy New Year to 2022. Let's just hope it goes a lot better, at least in terms of pandemics versus 2021. I am Ted Newell, your host, and this episode is called Knowledge is MedTech Power, a system for knowing your customer, market, and industry. So let's get the new year off to a good start and know your customer, market, and industry better than your colleagues and competition. It will pay off in terms of your professionalism, your results, and your career. Early in my career, I just took what the company told me as the gospel about what was going on in the medical specialty I sold into and the industry I participated in. Granted, way back then, the multitude of knowledge access points that exist today did not exist. For example, YouTube, e-newsletters, news aggregators, webinars, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, specialized websites, and so on and so on. With all these access points, there is really no excuse not to know what is going on in your market and to know your customer. In today's podcast and videocast, I will share my approach to this. And no doubt, after you listen to this episode or view it, you will have some good ideas to add. So please let me know, and I will mention them in the next podcast. We are going to review 4 categories of knowledge you should be investigating every week, if not a little bit every day. We will also look into 4 methods to stay up to date. And then I will go through a number of examples on my browser to show you exactly what I mean and put these methods into action. And when you are done listening and or viewing, you will have a very clear idea of how to set up your knowledge gathering system, and you will be better for it. Now, in the MedTech Leaders community, I'd like to welcome a number of new members that joined in December. Welcome on board. Great to have you here. And the raw video of this podcast will be in the community tomorrow. It will take me a few days or a week to get it onto the YouTube channel. The slides and everything will also be available to members of the community. And if you're interested in the MedTech Leaders community, which is a great place to share with other people like yourself, like-minded MedTech leaders, executives, sales and marketing professionals, and so on, you can go to medtechleaders.net. Again, that's medtechleaders.net. There is a free trial, and the current plan that we have costs no more than 3 or 4 good cups of coffee, depending on how big the cup is and where you buy your coffee. So if you like this podcast, please give it a rating, subscribe, and or recommend it to a friend. The easiest way to recommend is to simply share the podcast using the share link on your podcast service. Now let's go to the presentation, the slides, and my browser so I can explain to you my system for staying up to date and staying on top of customers, market, and industry. Okay, we're back, and it's time to look at some information that I'd like to share with you. So first, I'm going to go to my slides. And of course, you can see right here, knowledge is MedTech power. So why? It sort of seems like that's a stupid question, but there are some really good reasons that sometimes when we get really busy every day with the minutia of our jobs, we forget. And one is from a customer standpoint. You know, Chris Walker, who is the CEO of Refined Labs, and one of my favorite podcasts to listen to as a professional, which we'll get into later, is to succeed, you have to know your customer better than anyone else. And the next bullet is you have to know how the customer wants to buy from you. And you can only know that if you know your customer really, really well. And on those points, I really agree with Chris Walker. Again, the next bullet on customer standpoint is you need to know how you and your products fit into the healthcare system. From the market standpoint, you have to know everything going on in terms of trends and competition to be able to, one, take advantage of opportunities, and two, to foresee potential challenges. So you need to be on top of these things. From a career standpoint, you need to be able to demonstrate to all of your stakeholders that you are in contact with that you are a professional and you know your business. This is not only great with your colleagues at work, but it's also very important with your customers, that they know that you're a professional and you're on top of everything related to your products and services, and possibly even more, like general trends in their particular medical specialty ecosystem. Next, from the career standpoint, is that you must know what is going on in your industry to best determine the security of your current position and opportunities for growth. The payoff of all of this is that you will be more successful, and anyone you work for will have more success. Now, the next slide I go to is how do we do this? Well, there's 4 ways. And again, you're probably going to think this is pretty simplistic, but just bear with me because I think you're going to see a real method to my madness as we go through these and when I get to showing you specific examples. One is to read, and that is to skim newsletters and news aggregators. And this is a big emphasis on skim, because when I go through these 4 ways, you're going to be thinking, Ted, you just added several hours of work for me every week. Well, maybe I added an hour, and it may depend on how interesting the information is that you've seen. But this is important for you, and it will really help create a stronger foundation for your success. And that's why I have the emphasis on skim when I talk about reading things. And I'll give you a number of examples of what we can read in a little bit. The second bullet point here of the 4 ways is to listen. And of course, there's podcasts. The second point of listening is talk to your customers and make sure you really understand what's going on with them, not just about your product, but what's going on in their practice, what's going on in the hospital they work with, or the clinic they go to, or the floor in the hospital that they serve. Look a little bit wider than just what your product is and how you fit in from a product standpoint. Think about the bigger picture of where your customer is. But if we go back to podcasts, I want to make a point, because again, you're saying, Ted, you're adding a couple more hours of work for me this week. A way to consume podcasts more quickly is to speed up the player. I do this all the time. And there's only been a couple podcasts where I had to take it back to 1 times its normal speed because the presenter or the podcaster or his guest was speaking too rapidly. So I had to slow it down. But you can always rewind podcasts very quickly by clicking the 15-second rewind button that most podcast players have. But to consume them more quickly, speed them up. Then the third bullet here is to watch. And there you have YouTube. And a lot of websites have great videos, which are linked to YouTube frequently, but sometimes they're not. They might be linked to a Vimeo server, but that's okay. And again, on YouTube, you can speed up the video. Once you get used to speeding things up, it'll almost seem normal. And if you slow it back down, you'll think people are speaking slowly, but they aren't. They're just speaking like they normally do. So again, to consume more rapidly, but to still get the same information, I suggest speeding up the video. And the fourth bullet I'd like to talk about here in terms of 4 ways of doing this is to network, and that where you can go to LinkedIn, communities like MedTech Leaders, which I mentioned before and I'm the host of, or what I call catch-up calls. And you could set a goal to have a phone call or a Zoom call with one industry acquaintance per week. Hey, how you doing? What do you see going on that's interesting in the marketplace or in the industry or with these specialists that we're calling on? What really impressed you this last month or over the last several months? Anything different? Just start a conversation. You'll have a great time. And it's always great to catch up with somebody. But you will also learn a lot and you will stay top of mind with that individual, which can create lots of opportunities as time goes on. So, my next slide is I'm talking about the 4 categories of knowledge or information that you want to be investigating all the time. The first is the market specialties that you work in. And by market specialties, I mean, is it the ICU? Is it cardiology, neurosurgery, dermatology, spine, whatever it might be, ophthalmology? What is the specialty that you're working in? The second is how about the healthcare ecosystem you work in? Because even if you're selling to spine surgeons and you're very interested in being on top of everything related to spine, the healthcare ecosystem is going to be possibly an ASC, ambulatory surgical care center, or it's most likely going to be the hospital. And so, do you really understand everything that's going on in the hospital and ambulatory care surgical center ecosystems? Well, you should. The third bullet is the MedTech industry at large. And the fourth bullet is your professional specialty. Are you a leader like a CEO, a COO, CMO? Or are you more of a specialist in terms of marketing, digital marketing, or in sales? Are you an application specialist? Or are you a customer success specialist? You want to try to find ways to stay on top of your particular specialty so that you can excel in it. And then you also want to be looking ahead at where you want to go and know more about that. So let's say you're in marketing and you want to be a chief marketing officer someday. You need to be looking into that. So those are the 4 categories. Let me go through them really quickly again here. Number 1, market specialty. And there I'm talking about the surgical specialty, the customer that you're going to be involved in. And maybe that's what I should call it, is the customer specialties. But in any case, you know what I mean. Number 2, healthcare ecosystem that you're involved in. Number 3, medtech industry. And number 4, your professional specialty. And in each of these categories, you can find opportunities to read, watch, listen, and network. So now we're going to go to examples. And I'm going to stop these slides. We don't really need to come back to them, if I recall correctly, my battle plan here for this podcast. And let me bring up my browser. All right, now you can see my browser, and I don't know how it's going to show up on whatever video technology you're using. If it's a phone, it's going to be difficult to read some of these websites I'm referring to that I want to share so you understand the examples I'm talking about. So first, I'm going to start off, and these are some of the things I look at. So they're examples of what I dig into every day. One of them is not, but I'm using that generally for all of you listeners and viewers. But the first browser page we're looking at is Becker's Hospital Review. And so I'm at the website, but I get an e-newsletter from Becker Hospital every day. And I just skim it really quickly to see if there's anything that jumps out at me in terms of trends and so on. And so, for example, here at the website, they talk about today's top 20 healthcare news articles, and they go through them. And you can scrolling down through these, but here, COVID-19 sidelines 3,000 Cleveland Clinic caregivers. Let's see, here's another one. 250 plus New York nursing home owners file lawsuit to block staff requirements. If we scroll down a little bit further, eligible Kentucky hospitals can get up to 1.1 billion more in Medicaid payments. So you'll see a lot of interesting news pieces, and you don't even sometimes have to read them to get the understanding of what's going on. And a good example is, 5 hospitals temporarily, permanently closing services because of staffing shortages. That's a key trend that you need to understand. Are any of your hospitals under this kind of pressure? And does that mean that it's more difficult for them to assimilate a new product? Does it mean that you need to think about providing more training or more support to the hospital staff where your products are used? That's an important market trend, is the shortage of workers in the hospital systems that exist today. Another trend is hospitals that are cutting back on elective surgeries. You can see where it's taking place. If you look at this every day, you will learn this. And you will also see staff changes, C-suite changes at hospitals, and so on. So Becker Hospital Review is a great thing for the hospital ecosystem. But look up here across the top of this web page. And by the way, you'll see this big subscribe button over here. And if you click on that subscribe button, look at this. Which ones do you want to subscribe to? Hospital Review, Ambulatory Surgical Care Review, Dental and DSO. Which ones would you like to see there? And these are what they call their flagship newsletters. But there's also a number of interesting reports they have. Leadership, CEO report, clinical, cardiology report, whatever. You'll see these down here. You can subscribe to these. They're free information. Now let's go back to this, because another thing I want to point out going across the top here is you will see spine, clinical, health IT. They have a lot of these specialty newsletters that you can get every day. And another thing I want to look at here is if we go to, here it is, podcasts. Yep, you got it. They've got podcasts and they're good. I'd like to think my podcast is good, but I'm not going to go into this regular detail about the healthcare ecosystem like you're going to get if you listen to the Becker's Healthcare podcast. But they have a lot of other podcasts. They got spine and orthopedic podcasts. They've got the dental, the ambulatory care centers. They've got pediatric leadership. Way down here, they got cardiology and heart surgery podcasts. So if you are working in any of those environments and as a specialty, a great way to stay on top of these things. So you can see that Becker provides a lot of information that you can sign up for. It's free. It'll arrive in your in basket and you can read it. Another thing I want to share with you regarding the Becker's publications and newsletters is I'm going to use this example of the spine review. If you recall, what I mentioned earlier is if you go across the top of the website, you find spine, you get the spine review. And this is a synopsis of the newsletter that someone that is interested in the spine market would get every day. So let's just use this instead of the newsletter and the email. And if we scroll down through here, you might be thinking really quickly like none of this stuff means anything to you. And you're, maybe 5 spine surgeon moves in December. That might be interesting. Who knows? Maybe somebody's moving into your territory, or it's a market move that you want to recognize. If you're a marketing person, you want to send a note to one of these doctors in case you know them. But you're scrolling down and nothing. Here's 10 spine surgeons to know. That's always interesting because you learn a few new things about these people. And here you can see they list all these doctors. Maybe one of them is one of your customers or one of your key opinion leaders. And then we keep scrolling down and you get to, we need to make some hard choices. 3 spine practices priorities for 2022. Wow. Would you like to know what these practices are considering to be hard choices? Does that apply to any of the practices in your territory or the market that you're marketing to as a VP of marketing? Would you like to know what some of these things are? Is it going to affect your business in any way? This is what I mean. And then even if it doesn't completely affect you, you know something about your market. You could when you talk to one of your key opinion leaders, you talk to one of your customers, and you can say, hey, I read this interesting article. Are you concerned about the same things? Are these important to you? Now you're more knowledgeable. Now you have a better connection with your customer, whether you're a marketing person, whether you're an executive leader, then you run into a doctor at a trade show or a phone call or a webinar. you just look much more professional. You look like the kind of person somebody wants to do business with. And you now also know more about the market. So that's just an example here from the Becker Spine. And you can find this across all kinds of specialties. Okay, let's move on. The next thing is that another one I like is JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association Network. And so here you see the network. You can see over here it says Edward Newell. So I'm a member of the network, but that's just because I signed up for a newsletter. I didn't have to pay anything. And if you scroll down here, you'll see their publications. And here is JAMA Network Open. And it is one that I like a lot, and I get something from them all the time. They also have cardiology, dermatology, internal medicine, and then they also have some more. So I would really highly suggest that you sign up for that. And right here it says get the latest from JAMA Network. Put your email address in here and you're off to the races. But you can explore all their publications. Go up here and click the publication drop down list and you'll see all of them right here. And so you can subscribe to their daily updates or their weekly updates. So I highly recommend that. JAMA, the JAMA Network. And one thing you'll see when you get the emails from JAMA, especially their daily updates, is just read really carefully because it will say at the top of the update, this is the latest in orthopedic news. And then the next one you get the next day might say, this is the latest or the most highly read articles in cardiology. And a day later, it might be dermatology. So just pay attention to that so you don't waste time starting to scroll through something that means nothing to you. You can just delete the ones that don't. But I like JAMA. The next one's Helio. Helio is the publisher of a number of different journals, and therefore they've got a great news section. And you can see here's a bunch of news that's just coming out. And if we scroll down to the bottom, it says sign up for email. Get the latest news and education delivered to your inbox. Bingo. And then you can click a specialty that you're interested in. You can do all specialties. That's a little bit of a lot, but you can also, they've got everything here. Ophthalmology, optometry, endocrinology, cardiac. They must have 20 specialties here that you can sign up for specific news related to those specialties. So I highly recommend Helio, and I do subscribe to a couple of their newsletters. The next one I want to, show you is what I call, this is an example of what I call a media magazine or a specialty media magazine. And I'm using Urology Times as an example. You can find these media magazines and you already know about them probably because your companies advertise in them. And so they exist for orthopedics, for spine, for cardiology. There's a whole bunch of them, ophthalmology, dermatology, whatever. But I just wanted to show you, here's urology. And you roll through here. Oh, excuse me. At the top here, you'll see subscribe. And there it is, e-newsletter. Click on e-newsletter and you can sign up for their free e-newsletter. That's all there is to it. So I would highly recommend that you find the media magazine that is important to your specialties and maybe sign up for a newsletter from one or more of them. Now then, when it comes to industry, so what we've talked about so far is general specialty news. We talked about the healthcare ecosystem. A great one for that's Becker, which I already talked about and showed you. But when it comes to industry, a great newsletter service comes out of Mass Device. They have been around for decades and really give you the latest news across all specialty industries. And again, you can sign up for their newsletter. And if you, let's see, they have me logged in, so they might not offer the sign up. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. Sign up for our newsletter. Click on that. You can sign up, and they have several different types of newsletters you can sign up for, like Ortho Insight, drug delivery, business news, and so on and so forth. but I signed up for the general newsletter. And if you get that every day, and you'll sort of get a feeling for what kind of stuff is going on across industries in medical devices and med tech that could have an impact on what you're doing. Maybe what a competitor's up to, maybe what your company is up to and they haven't shared with you yet, or maybe some opportunities, maybe a company that's entering your particular marketplace and that would be very interesting for you to know more about, that you might be able to find a job with. Okay, and if you remember, one of the points I made earlier was related to listening, and we've already referred to some podcasts that you could find, for example, at Becker's Healthcare. You will also find podcasts listed on some of the medical specialty magazine websites. So, for example, in ophthalmology, if you went to one of the ophthalmology magazines like Review of Ophthalmology, you'll find a couple podcasts there. So if you wanted to listen to those kinds of podcasts, and they might even be specialized into certain areas, like it could be cataracts or it could be retina, you might find something you want to listen to that helps you connect better with your customers and learn a little bit more about what your customers are involved in and what that particular specialty is involved in day in and day out. But when it comes to your own, professional knowledge and your own growth, there are some broader medical device podcasts. So right here you can see I am showing FeedSpot's list of the top 20 medical device podcasts and as of December 24th, 2021. And the first one is Global Medical Device Podcast. It's supported by a really highly thought of company called Greenlight Guru, which is primarily in the regulatory affairs area and quality assurance, I believe, but they cover a lot of ground. And then look at that. Medical Device Success, my podcast, is in second place, which is sort of hard to believe, but I'll take that as a compliment. And then you have, remember I talked about the Mass Device newsletter? Mass Device has a podcast. They're not too long. Lots of interviews with executives. It's a little bit of a showpiece for companies to get some public relations and so on and so forth. A podcast that I like, if you're on the regulatory side and quality side, Medical Device Made Easy podcast. The focus there is regulatory and quality. But he has, and so you might think, well, I'm a marketing person, I'm not interested in that. Well, every month there's one podcast which is sort of a summary of all the important stuff going on, especially in Europe, related to regulatory affairs. And it might be a good thing for you to know, or if you're a CEO or a CMO, you might want to know how these things are affecting the marketplace over in Europe so you can be better prepared yourself. So that's one that you might want to be sort of following. Another one I like is Mastering Medical Device. Pat Cothy, who's the CEO of EM Device Labs, puts this out. It's a newer podcast. Well, I should say it's a year old, I guess now. And he's done a good job. He's also a member of the MedTech Leaders community. So that's another thing you can look at, is a list like this. As you're trying to choose a broad look at being a professional medical device industry participant, you could look at one of these podcasts as well. So another place to look that you should check out is, and this would be related to your particular specialty, and that would be something like if you're, let's say, a marketing person, and you might want to look at the American Marketing Association. Now, to get news from them, you would have to be a member. But there's a lot of organizations that share marketing news where you don't have to be a member. And there are some in the medical industry that do that. So I'm just using this as an example. It's, I think if you're a professional, it's $12 or $13 a month, but you get a great newsletter. It helps you stay on top of all the new things. And so, for example, under trending, it has digital marketing, content marketing, marketing communications. So there's a lot of things you can learn if you subscribe to something that's specifically related to your area of professional focus, which could be sales. There's a lot of great sales websites. It could be marketing. It could be leadership. So let me just type in here for a minute. So what I just brought up was the McKinsey and Company website. McKinsey, of course, is a widely respected management consulting company. They do research in all kinds of areas, and they've got some really good newsletters and a blog. So you can subscribe to it and you get a McKinsey newsletter. This is great, especially for leaders, for C-suite type of personnel. This is a great newsletter to receive. They've got a blog. I would highly recommend McKinsey. Some of the other big consulting firms do this as well. So that's another thing that I would suggest. And the final example I'm going to use is YouTube. I'm not going to get into Facebook or Twitter or anything at the moment, but so in YouTube, what I did was I came up with atrial fibrillation, surgical ablation with concomitant surgery. So the whole point about YouTube is it is one of the largest and most searched search engines in the world. More searching goes on here than most any other platform, perhaps except Google. And some of you could correct me on that, but it's a great place for content. And you will find videos either created by your company or by your competitors that explain their products that will help give you a feeling about what you're up against. It could be surgeons and or clinicians like nurse practitioners or whatever that are using products similar to yours that you want to learn more about. Now, here you can see this video may be inappropriate for some users. So I'm going to click the play button. And this is a video about surgical ablation of atrial fibrillation with concomitant cardiac surgery. And the whole point of this is that this is not a company's video. This is from the Cleveland Clinic, and it's a procedure that is meant for practitioners. And you can learn a lot from these, especially if it's a new technology that's coming out that you may think is interesting for you from a career standpoint, or you may believe is a threat to what you're selling yourself. And so it's a great way to stay up to date is to go into YouTube, search for some things, and you can subscribe to some of these things as well, some of these particular channels, like the Cleveland Clinic channel. So those are some examples, I'm going to stop sharing here, of platforms, e-newsletters, news aggregators, and so on that you can take advantage of to really make sure that you're at the top of your game in terms of knowledge about what's going on with your customer, what's going on in your marketplace, and what's going on in your industry. And of course, again, I want to emphasize that the fourth bullet on that, one of those last slides I showed, was networking. You cannot forget to do that. Staying in touch with some of the colleagues in your industry. It'll make you feel good because it's always great to keep up with people, but it's also a great way to learn new things that you didn't know was going on. People that have changed positions, new companies that have started, and so on. Great way to stay up to date is to talk to some of your colleagues. So I think I've covered everything. Let me go take a quick look at my slides here. And just a quick review. You're going to read, you want to listen, you want to watch, and you want to network. And then the four categories that you're concerned about are market specialties or your customer specialties, the healthcare ecosystem at large, the MedTech industry, and your professional specialty. I hope that gave you something to think about as you start the new year, and you can start the new year creating a really strong foundation in what you know to make sure that knowledge is power for you. Now go win your week.